through technology in education. And I think it's probably fair to say that this is sometimes quite a controversial topic. Some people are worried that, you think of technology in schools, you think of tablets and putting everything in front of children, a bit like I have now, and sometimes it can risk sort of ingraining challenges rather than actually improving them. And the legacy of online teaching at university also has been quite controversial. But there are real opportunities too that we really need to grasp. And what we want to talk about today is how we take some of the things that we learned during the pandemic and make sure that we're making the most of it. And you can use technology to reduce teacher workloads, things like No More Marking, I don't know if you've heard of that. You can do it to make teacher training more efficient by putting learning online rather than going to some of these training academies. You can sort of cut down on school, that sort of thing. You can use it to sort of democratise online learning resources, like the Oak National Academy that the government's been investing in, to sort of spread learning resources in a way that all schools, no matter where you are, no matter what level teacher you are, can access really high quality resources. And it can also, crucially, be really vital for the levelling up agenda. And it can break the link between geography and some of these places, and I'm sure Elnaz and Bo will come to this. But it means that children can participate in learning regardless of where they are. Maybe they're somewhere rural in Devon, experience an office in London or something like that. So it can have real benefits as well. And to do this, we have an absolutely brilliant panel, and I'm so pleased that they're all here. And we're going to first start with Dame Rachel D'Souza. She's the Children's Commissioner for England, and they do a vital work listening and delivering for young people. Next, we're going to come to Selene Saxby. Selene is the MP for North Devon and a former teacher. Then we are going to come to Elnaz. She's the head of research at Speakers for Schools, and we're so grateful to Speakers for Schools for partnering with this one up there. We're really excited about it. And then we're going to come to Bo Rogers. Bo is an absolute hero for being here, and he's going to deliver a young person's perspective as the co-chair of the Speakers for Schools youth panel. And really, really looking forward to hearing from you. And lastly, Jonathan Gullis is going to be joining us. He's running over from another event. He is the Secretary of State looking after school standards, but also a former teacher, so really looking forward to hearing from him as well. I'm going to be quiet because we only have an hour for this, and we're on a very tight schedule. And I'm going to pass over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Francesca, and it's great to be here at this event with Speakers for Schools Onward. I've seen Will Tanner down there, really pleased with the technology. So I'm the Children's Commissioner for England. I took up my post about 18 months ago, but before that I was a teacher and a sponsored academy principal, and I ran a trust of 14 schools out in East Anglia for 31 years. I was a teacher for 31 years. So this issue of technology is really close to my heart, and so I'm really, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. During that time, set up 4 free schools and really tried to, and with the sponsored academy movement as well, really tried to make sure we had innovation in education, because I think standards are important, but innovation is important too. Now, when the pandemic hit, and I think that's key to what we've talked about, that shift in thinking around using technology with young people. When the pandemic hit, I was running 14 schools, and basically and I was in school every day during the pandemic. And about Easter, it was the Easter holidays, and we thought, goodness me, we've got to get the whole, for how many years since I was ahead, from 2005, we've been talking about, wouldn't it be great to have all our lessons online? Wouldn't it be great, because if people were sick, they could see them? And wouldn't it be useful to do this? And it'd been talk, and never happened. And in fact, if anything, we moved away from online content. So what we did that summer, a few phone calls went around, and one of my head teachers, David Thomas, and a couple of other people decided they'd get all the MAT leaders together, share our resources, and actually try to all do our bit, chip in, and get working together, get an online curriculum. And that's how Oak National Academy was born. And within that Easter, by the end of Easter, we had a plan. We all divvied up. Inspiration Trust, my trust, did history and did a few other subjects. We all divvied it up, shared it out, and got something rough and ready out and going. And to me, that was now we're talking about Oak as a big national resource and all of that, but actually that moment where the system stepped up and said we've got to deal with it, I think is really, really important. Shows what's there, shows what's available. But we didn't just do that, did we? We also, for me, the morning assemblies online, you know, when kids were at home, struggling, worried, you know, actually being able to get on to everybody and talk to them online and have the year group together. It's really important. The celebrations, the punctuations of the day, for me as Children's Commissioner, thinking back to that time when I was, you know, leading a group of heads, you know, we were able to talk to kids who are at risk, who had social workers, who are at risk of abuse, and actually say, show us, you know, we're going to talk to you in your home, can I talk to your mum, can I talk to your dad, can you show us a thing to keep them safe? So we did a lot with the technology, and I think that's one good thing that came out of that awful pandemic, is that we suddenly realised what could be done, let alone all the time spent in travelling to ridiculous meetings and sitting together, where actually we managed then to use Zoom, Teams and other things to actually, you know, we can just get everyone on and do a conference online. Fantastic. The second point I wanted to make was, when I came into role then as Children's Commissioner, March, just as we were coming out of the pandemic, I wanted to know what young people thought, what they thought about what barriers were as they came out of the pandemic, what they wanted for their futures and their dreams. And so we did a major survey, the Big Ask survey, and it really got, you know, it was put out by teachers, it was picked up by teachers, by head teachers, by youth prisons, children in mental health wards, youth clubs, everywhere. So it became a big national survey. We've got 500,000 respondents. That's the biggest survey of its kind ever done in the world, of 4 to 18-year-olds, apart from the US Census. And we asked, and what did they tell us? What did children tell us? Well, just before I tell you that, I think it's also worth noting, 94,000 respondents had special educational needs. 2,800 were from Gypsy Roma backgrounds. From all 151 local authorities, no fewer than 3%, but up to 6%. Overall, it was 6% of the entire population of that age group. So I really think we got a bit of a sense of the voice of children at that time, right? Because it was in their voices, no gatekeepers. It was what they told us. So they gave us some really clear steers. They said coming out of lockdown, mental health, mental wellbeing was a key issue. Life at school, very problematic. They wanted, you know, there was getting back to support and all that. Also, things to do, places to go, sustainable, affordable things. Nobody wanted new shopping malls being built. They did want sport, drama, better tech things, libraries. And for their futures, and this is where it gets interesting, the number one goal of young people in the response, that 74% of young people said their number one goal when they grew up was great career, great job. All different. I mean, I met the next Elon Musk, I met the next whatever, but that was what they wanted, whatever that was. And there was also then about family, friends, community things to do. So we looked at the responses very carefully. There was absolutely children and young people crying out for more information about modern careers that were available for them and how to get there. So, like, no, you know, what we're learning in school, is it telling us actually what's available out there, what I need to do to get there, what skills I need, also what work experience opportunities I need. You know, a real desire to do those entrepreneurial, digital range of futures, but feeling like I really don't know how to get this, and my school isn't telling me. So I think there's something really important there to enable young people to have the careers that they want. You know, they're digital natives, our young people, and they're not getting the information they need about these things. The third thing, and tech and digital skills came up hugely. It came up as we need to know more about this. We need to know, and that's the voice. I mean, that is the voice of English children. That's 500,000 of English children. So we need to listen, and we need to do something. We need to respond. I think thirdly, I did want to just mention online harms as well. So out of that survey, there were some real concerns about actually what life is really like in the online world. And obviously we've all seen the Molly Russell case this week. My office has been working on this tenaciously. One of the most important things I did was get 16 to 21-year-olds into the DFE. So we got young people from King's College, from a range of sixth forms in London, brought them all into the department, and it's great to see young people here today. You should be on every panel, in my view. When we talk about the future and things like that, it means all that should mean is you should be here. But so we got hundreds of 16 to 21-year-olds, and we asked them, what do you wish your parents had known about life online? You know, and imagine that you're advising me for your younger brothers and sisters. My goodness, I mean, we wrote a booklet. My ears were like, I couldn't sleep for 2 nights. I mean, I think there is a world out there that we need to get to grips with, and we need to keep our young people safe. We need to make sure that they're equipped, and we need to know what we're dealing with. Now, I call in every 6 months. The tech companies, the big 8, have to come and see me. They've agreed to do it, and I am constantly on their case about taking down harmful, pornographic, abuse, pro-suicide material. I'm constantly on their case about getting underage off their sites and making sure those wretched algorithms that are great if you're looking at cats and dogs, but absolutely awful if you ticked on a self-harm thing, are not. I mean, to me, it's a moral issue. I mean, I've told them to get a moral compass in terms of using those algorithms on the under 18s. They've got to get that sorted. So we're providing challenge, and we are working very hard with government and others, policymakers, on getting the online harms bill back, online safety bill back, but focusing it on children's safety in a really, really sensible way. So I think that's very, very important. Final point from me then. Look, our young people are digital natives, they live online, they want careers online. We need to make sure we give them the skills, advice, support, and so that they can utilise the fantastic opportunities that tech and the online world give them for their futures. And I'll stop there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was an amazing start to the discussion, covering a lot from sort of safety to actually work experience and virtual work as well. So thank you. Celine, over to you.
Thank you, and it's lovely to hear from Rachel, who I had the privilege of meeting during lockdown, and to talk about our love of maths. So, as
We love maths.
yeah, it's a slightly niche subject, but adding up is quite important. Don't get me started on that. So anyway, I come from a family of teachers, so although I didn't teach very long myself, I was teaching at the time I was elected. And interestingly, I think for me, when we look at the conversations around learning online, I had to do part of my PGCE online, not because of the pandemic, just because that's how it's delivered. Things in rural Devon are quite tricky. And I know, I'm obviously much older than our youngsters on the panel, and so my life experience of learning online is very, very different. But I think it is remarkable what the whole profession did to put everything online for the pandemic. But I know I personally couldn't wait to get offline and get back to actually seeing people with legs again. And so I think it is, for me, looking forward, how do we balance technology so it delivers a real positive into the curriculum, rather than it just being, it's an easy way to do things, because I think there are some real upsides. And I love a Zoom meeting. I was the host of Zoom Drinks. That was my technological contribution. I mastered Zoom Drinks before anyone else. And twice a week it meant that colleagues and I were actually able to meet and discuss those issues. And it's not quite face-to-face, but obviously in a pandemic it's as close as face-to-face we got. But the challenge that we have in rural Britain, and which is why I was keen to actually speak on this, is in rural Britain. I also chair the All-Party Parliamentary Group on broadband and digital communications. Devon is behind the rest of the country by about 5 years. So during the pandemic, I, fortunately, from being the chair of the APPG, did know the Openreach team who came and connected up two of my schools. One of them was in the second pandemic, so I didn't even like to ask what they did in the first one. And the first lockdown, I was like, how did you get through? We're only connecting you up now. But one of my biggest schools, so I say bigger, its catchment is big. So in rural Britain, I think it's hard to understand the magnitude. So my best school in my constituency, the catchment is the size of Birmingham. To give you an idea of scale, 650 students at the school. Virtually none of them have broadband at home. So they have most of their students in most of the way through. And trying to connect up rural Britain, I think it's something that it's quite hard when you live in a city centre and you're used to having a hotspot and you pop in here. Our digital skills are very poor in Devon because we don't have digital access. And you can't learn digital skills if you can't get online. And it breaks my heart to sit down with 5-year-olds explaining to me the circle of doom. And that they know that they are different where they can't get online compared to friends and other students in other parts of the country. And yes, we're working hard and broadband is improving and it is getting better, but I think the legacy of that is that parents and teachers actually, if you haven't been online all your life, for those of you, I watch my nieces and nephews and they're so quick and they can do everything because you've done it all your lives, whereas if you haven't been online, so my digital skills aren't bad, they're not great, but those people who haven't been online because you can't get online, why would you have any digital skills? and how do you have them to pass down? And so some of those gaps that we're now looking at after catching up from the pandemic, we know that in our schools, not only was there very limited broadband, there were also very limited gadgets. So whilst it was great we managed to get gadgets out to people, it's not like households which might have 3 or 4 computers and iPads and everyone's got a phone, and therefore if you've got a few children who wanted to get online, you could do that. We have a number of households where there's not a single computer, maybe just one phone, with not actually enough service to be able to deliver some of these things. So some of these youngsters have really fallen a long way behind. And whilst I'm all in favour of using technology as an enabler, I think it's also important as we look still to catch up, because the reality is we're not going to catch up instantly, how far behind some rural communities, through no fault of their own, have ended up through the pandemic, and that actually we need to understand better when we write policy in Westminster. I'm disappointed Jonathan's not here to hear me say this, but when we write policy in Westminster, to understand not every child has the access to technology that we actually do in city centres. And I know I do a lot with Stephen Timms, who speaks a lot about access to devices, whereas for me it's actually connecting them to the outside world, because the device is great, but if you can't actually get online, it's not so much use. So I just like to sort of put that out there. It's a real passion of mine, but I think there is more to do, and before we push too much online. But I'm, second Rachel's calls for the online safety bill to come back and actually properly deliver, because I find online terrifying, and I'm a grown up, so I dread to think what it's like for those of you who don't have 50 years of learning about life. I think there's a lot we can do to improve it for everyone. But thank you for inviting me on today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dave. And such an important point there that yes, there can be real benefits from technology, but let's not just assume everyone has that sort of access from the get-go. Alice, can I come to you now?
Of course, thank you so much for having me. Great points raised by the Commissioner and Selene. So I'm Alice, I'm Head of Research at Speakers for Schools. We're a leading social mobility charity providing opportunities for young people to develop the kind of skills and access information they need for a successful transition to the world of work. Since the pandemic, we have ramped up our virtual offer across all our core programs, from inspirational talks to volunteering to enrichment activities and work experience, because obviously we understood the restrictions that the lockdown is putting on young people hearing from employers, seeing the modern world of work, and the offer of technology that can actually replace the face-to-face. And we immediately see the positive outcome of that from young people, because listening to the feedback they have provided, they've been telling us that in a very isolated world of lockdown, this was a very safe environment for them to see employers, to see how the modern world actually shifted from the pandemic, everyone working from home and using Teams and Zoom calls to communicate, but also to see the kind of information, advice and guidance that Rachel was alluding to, missing from the day-to-day of their lives because of the lockdown. So we really ramped up that offer, and we tried to make it as engaging as possible, because we do recognise the importance of face-to-face interactions, as Selene was mentioning, and we don't want to rule out those kind of opportunities, but we want to be in a place that nobody is restricted by where they're based and who they have access to, from hearing from employers, and to get that kind of information, advice to feel ready to face the future, an uncertain future. We recently launched a campaign for Work Experience for All, because we do recognise how important work experience is for young people, especially in such a complex and uncertain world. Seeing the world of work live, working with employers on tasks, developing solutions for employers, and I think it's getting a lot of traction across the policymakers, but also educators and employers, because they recognise that this is an unequal access to work experience across the country, and we want to solve that at Speakers for Schools. There's a research behind that campaign that shows for every work experience that young people do, there is wage premium attached to it when they graduate into the labour market, and we recognise how valuable that is in a costly life these days for everyone. So we delivered at least 60,000 opportunities online using trusted technologies to engage with young people, but we also tried to listen to make them work for educators, for employers and for young people. So they give us feedback that after every virtual work experience that they do, and we try to put that at the heart of the design of our programs to make sure their voice is heard. I'm sure Bo will touch on his experience later on and how he has managed to access a work experience 100 miles away from where he is, and how that benefits him for the inspiration he had for his career in the future. So that's the point that, of course, the face-to-face experience still is important, but there is real opportunity here to make sure everyone has access to work experience, and not just the ones who are surrounded by big employers at their doorsteps. And I think one final point I wanted to mention is that the evidence we gathered from our virtual delivery shows that young people are still developing the kind of skills that they did when they met employers face to face. So we analysed this feedback, and it shows that not only they deliver the sort of essential skills that employers are calling for continuously, such as communication, teamwork, leadership, but they're also developing the kind of digital skills that we are lacking in this country, and we're crying for to have more across different industries. So it's just that we know multiple experiences of the world of work puts young people in a very advantageous position when they enter labour market, but they also are equipped with the kind of skills that we're missing in the current economy.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And lastly, well, maybe not lastly, we're going to come to Bo.
Well, as was just said, I'm Bo. I'm a student at Camp Hill, sixth form. I first got involved with Speakers for Schools in 2020 when I completed a virtual work experience with a company called Spaceport Cornwall. One of the key draws that's always mentioned, and we mentioned earlier on actually, for online work experience is that it allows people in more rural communities to have access to opportunities and companies that would normally only be available to people who live in big cities. But I live in a big city, being Birmingham, and yet I still found that the access the online work experience granted me was extremely valuable. Just for entirely different reasons. I would really like, as an adult, to be an engineer working in the space sector, and it's a dream that seems far off, yet it's something that I'm very dedicated to trying to achieve, because I've been fascinated with physics since I was very young, since I was a toddler, and I've longed for some insight into the aerospace sector, or into literally anything to do with space. But it never crossed my mind to think about doing a work experience in the space sector, because I just didn't think it would be achievable. So in that sense, I feel like lockdown was sort of a blessing for me in disguise, because it allowed me to discover Speakers for Schools, and ultimately also discover the work experience that I did at Spaceport Cornwall, which is a 4 hours drive away, so I would never have ever been able to access it without being able to do this online. Throughout my work experience, I worked online over Teams meetings with a group of people my age and older, and our project was basically to come up with a new use for satellite technology, which is what Spaceport Cornwall deals in. They work with a company called Virgin Galactic to send satellites to space using innovative new methods. So we researched how effective our ideas might be, we explored the challenges involved with executing them, and then we finally pitched a plan to Spaceport Cornwall themselves. And even though all of this was conducted over the internet, I felt like it was genuinely one of the most valuable experiences I've ever had in my entire education. We worked in teams to come up with ideas. We eliminated concepts that didn't seem like they would actually be that valuable, and we did all of it over a very short time scale, which obviously helped me to develop my team working skills, but it also helped me develop my critical thinking, my time management, and it helped me to learn the most effective ways of communicating within the context of developing an idea and within the context of the project that I did. and lastly, I feel like despite not communicating with people directly in person, it developed my communication skills in a large way as well. Because we had to do a lot of research for the project to see what things would be effective, I was finding it difficult at points to do all of this research online. So I decided to just pick up the phone and speak to people in the field that I would be, that my project was about. So I picked up the phone to a group called the Cornish Fish Producers Association, because the project that we were going to do with satellites was to do with fish conservation. And I had a very productive, like 45-minute long conversation with them. And so even though that's not a skill, like person-to-person communication isn't a skill that you'd expect to be developed in an online work experience, but genuinely it really was. Not only over Zoom, but also just learning to take those different approaches because of the challenges that are presented by doing a project like that. So I have a little more to say. I hope I don't ramble on for too long. So the practical tasks were a great insight. I love the creative process, but equally hearing from people at Spaceport Cornwall who worked all different sorts of jobs and performed all different kinds of roles, I feel was extremely valuable to me. Obviously, I found out about the work that they did, but I also learned a great deal about the different paths that they took into the industry, and it was a lot less limited than I thought it would be. I'm from a big city, and I applied for this opportunity in a rural setting, in a sector that I would never have been able to access. So I feel that one of the biggest benefits, in my case, for online work experience is less where it allowed me to access, but who it allowed me to access. Because both my parents work in the arts. I don't have connections to the world of science. I don't know any, rocket scientists. But so I was never in an old boys club in that kind of sense with anything scientific, despite it being my passion. So having this online access really allowed me to connect with those kinds of people. I've never done an in-person work experience myself, so I can't really make a direct comparison, but I've spoken with friends and family who have, and it seems as though many of them don't feel like they did much meaningful work. The work experience I did was carefully curated, partially because it's online, and I feel like there was more pressure for companies who do online work experience to choose to truly create an experience that people will want to carry out, because otherwise people will just quit, whereas you can't do that when you're actually there. So it felt very curated and very relevant, whereas I don't think that would always be the case in in-person work experiences. So it's clear to me that an online work experience can play a real significant role in giving young people access to opportunities that they would never otherwise have had. And in many ways this should come as no surprise to me, because for my entire life I've learned online and I've accessed new knowledge online, but it seemed, somehow I was still shocked at how much insight I was able to gain and how interesting and valuable the experience of an online work experience actually was. I'm dyslexic, and although I read quite a lot, I've found a lot of online learning is one of the best ways for me to do it, because I can watch videos or talk to people online. And I think we've only really scratched the surface of technology's future in enabling disadvantaged people, disadvantaged young people, to access places, opportunities and people, as well as knowledge that they would never have access to if they weren't online or in person. So,
Chloe, that was absolutely brilliant, and clearly all those communication skills that you learned are coming in handy. Yeah, that was great, and an amazing advocate as well for the work that Speaks for Schools is doing, and so we're so delighted to have you on the panel. I wanted to start with a question: if if we're talking about greater adoption of technology and using virtual learning and this sort of thing, who do you think is responsible for doing this? Is there a role for sort of policymakers and ministers to lay the groundwork for schools to be taking up these sort of opportunities? Or do you think it's actually more schools themselves that are sort of in the position to do it, or indeed charities like Speaks for Schools? Can I come to you, Rachel?
So all of the above. Although the bit I'm going to talk about is actually school leaders and schools, because I mean for many years, ever since I've been in leadership, in school leadership, I think the mantra has been the self-improving system.
Yeah.
Heads being able to deliver what's needed, and I think Selene has just given us a really brilliant example of kind of what might be needed in a very rural area. Compared to say what's needed in an inner city compared to what's ever, and I think local leaders are really sort of able to determine what we need, and I mean it's interesting because just I gave that example of Oak National Academy, but also when we went into lockdown, I know I looked around my trust and the first thing I did was a survey of who has not got the internet. Who's not got that in their home, who's not got a device, who's sharing a device between four other children.
Yeah.
What we did was we basically worked that out, costed it up, and bought the laptops, put the internet in people's houses, worked it all through. Before the DfE had even managed to provide one laptop to any child, we had it all sorted, and we weren't the only group. So I actually think we're close to the ground, able to do it, but I do think policymakers, it's really useful for them to be looking globally, looking at what's possible, working with business to give us the ideas, and I want government to be the enabler. So I think if ministers can enable in terms of sort of making sharing best practice, prioritising and doing things. So I think there's a job for everyone, and obviously funding comes through there as well. But I do think. We should be listening to young people, we should be understanding what the world is like, and then I think it's the on the ground, swift and nimble, able to do it is how it can happen.
Brilliant, thank you. And I suppose actually what you speak of is one of the real benefits of the sort of multi-academy system, because there's capacity and you can organise in a way that potentially standalone schools wouldn't be able to. Selene, can I come to you on this question? Am I right that your dad was a headmaster?
Yes.
What do you think about this? Is it the role of the schools to be doing this, and how can government help schools to sort of innovate and adapt?
I think obviously each school is different, and the same as each family is different, and I think that is the real challenge when you actually come to legislate for anything, is that you are covering many different shaped things under the one umbrella, and that's why I think it is also so vital to rely on the skills and expertise that your local heads are able to deliver, because they actually are also linked back to those local families and what they need to have delivered in. So I think there is obviously a role for government, but I agree entirely with Rachel that it is about facilitating and enabling school leaders to deliver those things, and the experience when you actually come and talk to someone like they're in remote, rural and particularly coastal heads. So my dad was actually a head on a it was at the time the third biggest school in the country, 1,800 children in the middle of a council estate on a cliff. And when I started teaching, no, it literally was actually during the hurricane, and he lost 1,000 panes of glass overnight. It was literally on a cliff. And so when I taught in a coastal comprehensive and a little bit smaller, to find exactly the same issues that my father had dealt with. So I think there are things that we clearly have failed to facilitate, be it as a head or as a government, in terms of addressing some of the issues around deprivation in coastal communities and rural accessibility, be that transport in my day and age, be it technology in your day and age, that how we need to recognise that not everything is the same shape, and we need to put those structures in place that enable heads to really do the best for their young people without creating blockers, but you cannot assume that every school is exactly the same and or is needed to deliver exactly the same for the children coming through who need to live in different communities.
And the only thing I'd add is I think we've missed a group out, which is business. And I think there's something about how we enable business to support us in this endeavour and involve business in that. So we've got great global businesses, we've got who actually know how to do things, and I just don't think we've ever been good enough in the 31 years I've been a teacher and educator. finding really good ways to get the best out of business and partnering with business to actually deliver in some of these areas. It's an untapped resource in my view.
Yeah, and I would, again, as Rachel, I do speak the same language all the time. But certainly where I am, when I left teaching and became the MP, I visited companies that I didn't know existed less than 10 miles from where I was teaching. And I was being asked to deliver careers lessons, yet I didn't even know what was there. And so and when I go visit these schools, they still don't know how to get back in. Rurality is a factor within that, but also some of these big multinational corporations where it might just be a branch that makes this up here, still needs the skills, but doesn't necessarily have that local knowledge to be able to tap into. And when you're somewhere like I am, where we don't have a university, we're 65 miles away from a university, and we have one FE facility up there, it's very hard to even rely on some of the sort of further education facilities you might normally expect to be a better bridge. So yeah, I think there are real opportunities, and the Blythe STEM Hub is the model that I would suggest is an excellent way of looking at.
I think also the charities have a role to play here, like Speakers for Schools have the platform to connect the educators with employers in the most innovative way, and we know how to bridge that gap because we connect with employers, we understand their demands and what they need for their future talent plan. They come to us to help them design work experience, but we also support educators to lift the burden of all the admin work and the cost that comes with it and the capacity that they need. So there is real opportunity here to raise the profile of charities who are trying to connect the dots, but we need the backing of the policymakers, the educators understanding how important it is for their young people, which I think they do to some extent with the GATSI benchmarks and career strategy coming to birth in 2017. There has been real emphasis on a well-established careers provision for educators, and they recognise it now. So there's a real momentum here to build on, getting a lot of people around the table and potentially use innovation and a forward-looking solution to solve this long-lasting problem.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And that's something, actually some Onward work is coming out quite soon, specifically talk about schools and the charity sector, because you speak to sort of head teachers and they say, we'd love to do this, we just don't even know where to start. And it's linking all those sort of community assets up as well. Jonathan, it's great to have you here. Just to sort of quickly sum up, we have been talking about technology in schools as sort of an enabler, not just making education easier, but actually the value it can add as well. And I'm sorry, Mr. Bo has just done an amazing explanation of the virtual work experience he did, enabling him to work far away from home, learn these new skills in a way he wouldn't have been able to do in person. And so it was a really brilliant advocate. But would love to hear from you as well.
Well, I first of all apologise. I was double booked, so I was spending the first. I can't believe Freddie from schools he wasn't there. But I was at the NASU. Oh, he was good. I was at the NASUWT fringe event, who apparently hadn't had a minister for a long time turn up, so I thought it was important to meet with trade union colleagues. But this doesn't mean that Onward's not important. And in fact, as a minister, you're very quickly learning that your words have consequences. And what I mean is that because I've had an opinion on education policy so profusely, and actually worked with Francesca and others, like the New Schools Network, to produce a report, suddenly, I remember Will giving me a text on the day of getting the job saying congratulations and look forward to seeing all those things that we recommended jointly now happening. So I've set myself up to fail probably, but let's see what we can do, because I think it's important to pledge what you claim, and when you're given the opportunity you should try and deliver. In technology, it's so important. We know that actually technology within schools under the Education Endowment Foundation helps progress by about 4 months. And obviously when we're in the era of trying to get kids to catch up, particularly with the National Tutoring Programme, it's even more critical that we see technology as not something to be fearful of, but something to embrace within the teaching sector. And there are many great schools doing that, taking that challenge on. And I suppose my job is to make sure that I espouse those views much more loudly and share them much more widely. Because I think that actually, and I said this on the panel with Rachel yesterday, I think the profession, I think I nicked it off Rachel actually at something 2 weeks ago, but I think the profession actually has a lot of the solutions already, and actually what we should be doing is just highlighting where that best practice is and then figuring out how can we roll that out at scale. and that doesn't mean a one-size-fits-all approach, because that wouldn't work in education. But there's certainly things that can be explored and looked at. And we know that also if we're going to help in recruitment and retention of teachers, that technology has to play a part as well, because actually an EdTech survey suggested that there was positives. Overall, 3/4 of head teachers believe that technology had already or would in future reduce workload. So that's something to really embrace as well when we are facing challenges in keeping, getting people to come into the profession, but also that challenge to keep people beyond 5 years. We are, at this moment in time, I would say stagnating. We're not seeing a downward trend, but we're seeing a stagnation at the 5+ year challenge. And what we need to do is how can technology play its role as long as any other reforms in that space. In terms of this virtual work experience, is something that definitely we should be looking at and listening to, and seeing like why we made that possible. And I did hear Rachel say it on Selene as well, that businesses, and we need to embrace businesses within the education system. Colleges for a long time have got this, as have universities, and it hasn't yet trickled down. Probably not meant to utter those 2 words, but hasn't yet reached the state sector in education. Look, private schools have always had an advantage. They obviously have students who are paying, so they've invested quite early on. But there are some of the state school sectors that have really gone in heavy on education. I know Shore Education Trust have taken on kids go secondary and primary school. Sorry to shamelessly plug my own area, but they're really driving forward technology and using Google Education. Others can be, there are other providers out there, not a political one. But they're using that within their classroom. They're saying it's having a hugely positive impact and helping with the parents engage with the learning that's taking place within the classroom. I remember flip learning when I entered the teaching profession, about how actually we should give our lectures on YouTube videos and set homework based on that, and then kids will go home and watch their video over and over and over again. But it was a resource that was always available to them, a free resource for them to access that was high quality, led by their teachers. And I did try it, and I probably wasn't the face for it, but my departmental colleagues were. And I found that was something that was hugely beneficial as well. So I think technology is something that's important. It's important to actually use business and let business to invest in this area. Not everything has to be or should be driven by government. It's by improving relationships between the business sector who want to invest in young people, who want to get into schools more because they see the opportunities available to them. It's about how we unlock that current block that's in place at this present moment in time. Because in Stoke-on-Trent, we have digital T-levels. We have a full fibre network that's one of the leading ones in the country. We've installed the motorway, as it's called, around the city. We're now going to homes. I think around 60,000 homes will have full fibre access by the end of this year. So, in a city, that's quite a remarkable speed of going. And by the way, we deliver that under budget. We actually sent DCMS £600,000 back. So that's how great the city of Stoke-on-Trent is. And what we've seen there is the Staffordshire University, which is the leading university in the UK for video games development courses. We have around 2,000 graduates currently in their year 1 to year 3. So we've got the post-16 sorted locally, but there's not enough local kids going into Staffordshire University, because let's be frank, there are people in households where they'll only have one iPad, and that iPad is shared across the entire household, or one mobile phone. There may be only, we forget, I'm lucky, I have unlimited data on my phone. That's not the case for many of those from deprived backgrounds. And the government did invest heavily in technology when it came to the pandemic, and a lot of schools I know have got laptops up to the eyeballs, but can't let them sitting in a cupboard gathering dust. We've got to figure out how we're going to get those into the hands of those kids and those families that need them most, so they can be used as a really good tool to help narrow the attainment gap that we desperately need to make sure we narrow, because ultimately we don't want to just keep creating jobs in areas like Stoke, but not have Stoke-on-Trent young people filling them. That defeats the purpose of the whole idea of levelling up. And education is how we level up long term. And I know it's not interesting to talk about 10, 20 years, but let's not forget that every pound we put into a young person today, we get 10 plus back, in the future. And whilst I know that in politics sometimes it can feel that we're just going for the short-term win, actually I think levelling up is a long-term view of what can be done and how it can be delivered. Technology has to be at the centre of that. We talk about science superpower. It should be a science and technology superpower is what we should be trying to become. And I think if I can go around places like Stoke and sell video games, and that whether it be fine art skills, your program development, your coding, whether that be merchandising, that is something I can sell to young people as a new wave of industry waiting to be unleashed in a city that's looking for something new to drive it forward. After it was the heartbeat of the industrial revolution in its original context, I want us to be the heart of the technological revolution, the digital revolution, and I'm sort of shamelessly plugging Silicon Stoke that I've been banging on about time and time again.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Jonathan. And as always, the most amazing advocate of Stoke and everything you do there. So we have about sort of just over 10 minutes left, and I want to get some questions from the floor. So any questions that people have? I'll go for this gentleman here, and then to you again.
Thank you. I'm a counsellor from Harrow, portfolio holder for Children's Services. And it's fascinating what you've said about business, because one of the things I'm struggling to do is engage business, and I think there's scope for them to do that. I think there's as you quite rightly said, there's a real passion and a commitment to try and engage. And I also think they have a longer incubation period in terms of long-term learning. And I think that if we can have either incentives, or if we can have some connect with schools, it allows them to develop just the skills, but also, as Bo has illustrated, I think, that it can also reach out, because I think one of the things that's clear is about upskilling and how the needs are going to change as we go forward. What are jobs today may not be jobs around in 10 years' time. So I think if there are incentives, I can only pressurise to say that will really be helpful. I think lots of schools are willing to engage. I think you're right, there are solutions already there, but it'd be great to have some sort of engagement even with local councillors to see how we can support that. And have a need for the future. So
you have one question on businesses and what incentives maybe are there or could be created to encourage them to link up with our education system. And you say.
Hello, thank you. Yes, my name is Nicholas Hislop. I work for the Baker Deering Educational Trust. We support the University Technical College programme. There are 48 in the country and 19,000 students now. And I just wanted to link something that Dame Rachel said and then what Jonathan said. The presentations were superb, could pick up so many questions. However, it's around the take-up of the design and technology, because the GCSE design and technology, the take-up has fallen by 71% since 2010. And one of the barriers to that, and I'm sorry to say, but one of the barriers to that is the EBAC, because design and technology isn't part of the EBAC suite of GCSE subjects. So whilst this meeting is about actually how can technology help young people, there's a problem insofar as that D&T isn't being picked up at secondary school. And then it has a consequence of A-levels, and can I also then say, Minister, it's going to have a consequence for the take-up of T-levels as well.
Yeah.
So thank you. It wasn't a question, it's a plea really.
Well, we can make
plea.
a question, but it's a really important point.
It's a plea.
Can I come to you, Alnaz, on this question of incentives, and maybe we can expand it to charities as well, and how maybe we can encourage more businesses and charities to reach out to schools, whether there's incentives that you found that actually could be used more widely?
Sure, actually, during the conference we have heard a lot about how can we incentivize employers to do more of these kind of activities. I think they are already motivated because of the talent pipeline issue and the skills shortage. So that's like something they recognize, they understand, and they have real concerns. So it's part of our strategy to tap into that conversation with employers to understand their worries and provide them with the opportunity to speak to young people directly, to talk about how it is like to work for our industry, what are the lives of people coming to our workplaces, and how you can actually get the education that you need to successfully achieve that. So I think it's something that employers already recognize. And as speakers for schools, actually, we don't have problems of employers coming to us. They have really taken it seriously. We have oversupply of work experience in our programs, so we're actually finding it hard to get young people to do them. So I say employers have understood the problem. They see it as an opportunity to work with charities like Speakers for Schools, and they really have stepped up to support young people. But I think the incentive, the financial incentive, is something to be explored by other members.
Brilliant, thank you. And Rachel, can I come to you on this question of the EBAT and design and technology?
Yeah, and first can I just say I've seen some fabulous UTCs. I've been fascinated by the UTC programme. I visited JCB and a range of others, and I'm really passionate about. I was always a great supporter of the work to have a rigorous academic curriculum. I think that's every child's entitlement, but I want to see a rigorous vocational one as well, that can be highly motivational from 14 up, and involve the kinds of skills development, tech, things like that we're talking about, that can sit alongside everybody's entitlement to get a great basic rigorous education, academic education. It shouldn't be either or, we can do both, and I think that's the challenge of the next point. And I'm going to keep going with the UTCs. I think particularly with the family of schools model, we could finally get ourselves in a situation where vocational schools can thrive, and actually really be part of the firmament. So I'm really keen on that. And on DT, absolutely. So I'd love to see DT as part of the EBAC. I don't see why it shouldn't be. If EBAC's whatever, just count it, 'cause it's an incredible subject. I think one of the issues we've got to deal with though is workforce. It's really hard as a head out in Luton and Norfolk, and then leading a group of trusts out there. Actually getting qualified DT teachers is an issue, so we need to think about workforce and pipeline, but I don't see why not. And also for vocational education from 14 up, it'd be getting people from industry into classroom, and it's just fantastic for young people. I watch 14, 15-year-olds looking at now teachers who've come in after careers in banking, looking at them like, wow, tell us about the world out there. So there's something really important there about bringing it upside in. I would just say on the point on getting business engaged with schools and schools engaged with business and third sector, those points I really agree with. I do think, seeing as we've got Minister Gullis here, I do think there is something that our Minister and his boss and actually Liz can do in terms of fostering that, and actually getting in some of the big employers. It's work I've done in the past with previous sources saying, I know you want to do those at CSR, I know you want to engage with schools. I'm going to put it together with school leaders. We're going to do some DFE or number 10, like big, get everyone together there and do some thinking, because it's amazing how that focuses the mind. You'll find yourself very much in demand, and as will PM, as will others, and it can do a lot to unlock that. So I think that's where I think government could be a real enabler. Because I did my postgrad at Cranfield, my business bit, when I took over being an academy principal years ago, and I was sitting with in a room of top businesses, people about to become VPs or chief execs of Orange or Stock Exchange, or everywhere. I was the only teacher, and they're like, how can we help, Rachel? What can we do? And I think we need to show them what to do for these guys, because they want more of that and less of us.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially as they get older.
Thank you. We have a very short amount of time left. I'd love to direct any questions to Bo if anyone has any. This lady here has got her hand high, and then I'll come to you. But as brief as possible, please, because we really are running out of time.
Thank you so much. Jonathan, it's great to hear you talking about the importance of shining a light on best practice already in the system. And I work at Young Enterprise, and we work with schools right across the UK. And we would love to work with you in helping to illustrate some of our best practice that we see day in and day out, and help to disseminate that across the sector. One question I have for you is, in terms of in your role as Minister, how do you think you can play a role in disseminating some of that best practice in practice, basically? Because I appreciate there kind of is a tension between kind of school autonomy and no one size fits all, but at the same time it's really important to be kind of disseminating as much best practice.
Thank you. And I want to. Does anyone have a question for Bo? Because I really want to make sure we're using his expertise as we're here. No.
You sharpened everyone to submission. I need to learn from you.
I think everyone's
I need to learn from you.
Okay. Well, Jonathan, you can come to that question. I'll let everyone think, and we do have a couple minutes.
So I see my role very much as being someone who literally just goes out there and talks about this. Dispatch box is incredibly powerful tool to talk about best practice, naming schools directly where best things are happening, naming teachers on the ground, naming students and young people. You know, I proudly did it as a backbench MP. But Rachel's right. Young people don't want to see old farts like me talking about things. They want to see people like them who they can engage with or at least relate to. You know, much more. Teacher talk is one of the things that I used to be very bad at and got better with. So I think it is about naming there. I think it's about us working with Education Endowment Foundation to have, like, you know, pro formas of best practice. So, you know, having research papers or just like one-sided A4s, just like this has happened, this is what the outcomes were. That for me would be the way forward, personally. But I think it has to come. What we need is Bo and his crew here, and people like yourself. You need to be the face of this, not me. Believe me, I can talk about it, and I'll mention it in every interview. I'm sure Freddie and I are going to become best friends over the next 18 months before I get sacked by the electorate, I'm sure. But that's a joke. Don't worry, that doesn't need to be it's a joke. It's a joke. But you know, what I will do is, well, you know, I can give it every quote there about actually if you're driving it, and I'll give you the platform to sell what you're doing.
Great, thank you. Bo, I want to ask you. You've spoken so amazingly about your experience. What could maybe your school do or your friends do to take this up more? Because you said you hadn't really heard of it over the pandemic. Is there anything you can think of that schools could do to help more people take up sort of work experience and these opportunities?
Yeah, I definitely think there are things that can be done, because prior to the pandemic, even though there was constant, every year we would be asked to do work experience, and they would provide us with some opportunities. Mm-hmm. But because online work experience wasn't as prominent as it is now, largely as a result of the pandemic, all of the work experiences were quite limited. So if people weren't interested in the opportunities that were nearby, a lot of people just wouldn't engage with it. And I think that for a lot of jobs that people really want to do, there's so much competition anyway that it's a lot more difficult if it's in person for everyone to actually do something they want to do as a work experience. So I think just making sure that people have access to online opportunities in work experience when they're in school, like in, say, after school hours, they can still engage with it on school premises with the school's technology, and making sure that people are actually aware of all of the breadth of online work experience that is there.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think you've given the Minister lots of things to think about.
I think school standards minister. This is very
I think we have probably time for one more question. This lady was waiting very patiently, but as brief as possible, please.
No problem. We were talking a little bit about the online safety bill earlier, and I'd be really interested to know when we're talking about finding information and education online, which both spoke to very openly earlier. How do we legislate against sort of personal teacher agendas in teaching our children things that they're not sure about?
Great, thank you. So, online safety bill, legislating things that might be controversial. Sloane, I'll come to you and we'll work our way down.
I think it's always hard, as I said earlier, to legislate because of the diversity and what we're actually looking at, and I think there are real risks around what things can end up in classrooms and debates. So, yeah, I hope we can sort it out, but I would like to also just, if I can, just come back to the lovely lady from working from Young Enterprise, which I'm a huge advocate for in my patch, but my schools are so remote they couldn't get any business support in, and so they made the finals even without a business supporter, and I think this link between business and schools, again, when we're looking at what we can do, and what I'd really like to actually do is to take Bo's aspiration back to North Devon, because my fear is that I might be able to offer on some online work experience, but my youngsters, partly because of their rurality and the lack of external opportunities that they've seen, they don't wake up and say they love science and wanted to be a working space. So anytime you're passing, please come and see me. But I very much hope we can find the solutions moving forward to enable technology in that bill.
Thank you. Anna, do you have a sort of take on this question?
No, I'm not specifically in that question, but I just want to say we work with teachers to help them provide the kind of experiences that young people are aspired to do in line with their career aspirations. So we have really proper processes and code of conducts, and making sure that everyone is safe and nothing out of context is mentioned. We do have safe environments for young people to log in, and it's like really taking that seriously as we do for schools. So hopefully that would stop any harm for our young people.
lot. But I'd also add parents are an amazing asset.
Absolutely.
So we can use parents more as well. Jonathan, one line on this question, and we're going to have to wrap up.
It's incredibly hard to legislate with the information that's so readily available on the internet, but the Online Harms Bill has an important role to play in terms of controversial topics. Teachers have had very clear guidance about what is and isn't acceptable in terms of teaching difficult challenging topics. No personal agenda should ever be present in the classroom, regardless of party politics or personal views on things. The job of the teacher is to mould the difficult discussions, the difficult topics, and allow children to explore all the different available viewpoints out there, allow them to go to the safety of their home, and allow them to talk and engage with their parents and carers, and allow them to come with their own views and opinions. It should not be that you're having your views and opinions forced upon you as a young person. It would not be acceptable in any other workforce. It's not acceptable in teaching workforce either.
Brilliant, thank you, Jonathan. And I think we're going to have to sum up there. But it's been a really, really interesting discussion. I'm so grateful to Soleil, to Elnaz, to Rachel. She had to run for a train. Jonathan and Bo. It's been really, really interesting. And I think we could have gone on for a lot further. So thank you very much.